Have you ever walked down a road burdened by your own sorrow, only to have life throw something unexpected at you? Something that could either crush you further or bring you back from the edge? This is the story of a man who, after losing everything, found something more important than he ever expected. And it all started with a cold, rainy night and a simple act of cruelty. But sometimes, kindness can change everything. I walked along the highway after another grueling shift at the warehouse. The days blurred into one another, a never-ending cycle of exhaustion and loneliness. 6 months had passed since Ella, my wife, had died, and nothing seemed to fill the void she left behind. I had gotten used to the silence, the emptiness of the house. There was no joy left, just survival. It was one of those cold, rainy evenings where the world feels heavy, as if the sky is mourning with you. The road stretched ahead, indifferent to my pain, while I trudged along, my boots sinking slightly into the muddy ground with each step. It didn't matter. What did anything matter anymore? That's when it happened. A black SUV roared past me at high speed, kicking up a wave of icy water from a puddle that soaked my boots and splattered my jacket. For a moment, I considered getting angry, but then I just wiped the mud off my face with my sleeve and kept walking. Another inconvenience. One more on top of everything else. But then the SUV stopped ahead, and a woman in an expensive suit stepped out. She walked briskly to the back of the vehicle, opened the rear door, and yanked out a large golden dog by its collar. Without hesitation, she shoved the animal into the cold, wet grass, slammed the door and drove off, leaving the poor creature behind. I stood frozen, a sick feeling growing in my chest. But that wasn't the worst of it. No, the worst was yet to come. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, watching the taillights of the SUV disappear into the distance. The woman's cruel act echoed in my mind, but I couldn't bring myself to react. I had seen too much of the world's injustices already. In fact, I had become numb to it. But then came the sound, a long, desperate whimper that tore through the night air. I turned, my feet moving almost of their own accord, drawn to the sound of suffering. There, just a few feet behind me, was the dog. It was a golden retriever, its fur matted and dirty, its eyes wide with fear and confusion. The animal was looking directly at me, not with anger, but with an unspoken plea for help. I didn't move for a moment, lost in the intensity of its gaze. Those amber eyes seemed to say everything, yet nothing at all. She was just a dog, abandoned by someone she trusted, but those eyes were filled with more than fear. They held a sadness I knew all too well. I had lost everything, or so I thought. But maybe, just maybe, this moment, this dog, could help me find a way forward. I took a tentative step closer. The dog stiffened, instinctively pulling back. Her body trembled in the cold, her tail tucked between her legs as she growled low in her throat. A warning. But I didn't back off. I was used to pain, used to loneliness, but the thing that struck me most was how much she needed something. Or someone. Slowly, I crouched down, keeping my movements calm, allowing her to take in my scent. She didn't seem entirely convinced, but after a long moment she stopped growling. I took a few more steps forward, and finally, she allowed me to get close enough to touch her. I wasn't sure if she trusted me yet, but something told me I couldn't leave her here alone. "Come on," I whispered, my voice breaking the stillness of the night. "You don't have to be alone anymore." She sniffed my outstretched hand, hesitated, then gently nudged it with her nose. I could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the weariness of someone who had been abandoned just like me. I carefully reached down, placing my hand on her back. She flinched slightly but didn't pull away. For a moment, we stood there in silence, the cold wind howling around us, neither of us quite sure of what to do next. But in that moment, something shifted inside me. I didn't know what to expect when I took her in, but I knew I couldn't walk away. I bent down and gently scooped her up, feeling her cold, trembling body against mine. As I held her, I could feel her warmth slowly seeping into me, a faint, reassuring sign that we both still had a little fight left in us. With the dog in my arms, I began to walk back the way I had come, the path ahead now feeling a little less lonely. As I walked the 20 minutes back to my small house, The weight of the dog in my arms seemed to ground me. There was something reassuring about her presence, even though I could feel the deep tremors in her body, the residual fear that clung to her like a second skin. Her fur, once golden, was matted and dirty, caked with mud and grime from the cold night. Her eyes never left me, always searching, always wary, but there was something else there too, something I hadn't seen in myself for months. Hope. I couldn't help but think about Ella, my wife. She loved animals, especially dogs. I used to joke that she would adopt every stray she came across if she could. If she were here now, I knew she would have wanted to help this poor creature. She would have insisted we take her in, nurse her back to health, and give her the love she so clearly needed. A lump formed in my throat as I thought about Ella's laughter, the way she used to make even the darkest days feel brighter. I missed her more than words could express. But right now, it wasn't just about me. It was about this dog, this living, breathing creature who needed someone, anyone, to show her kindness. I arrived home, my small, humble house standing cold and empty in the dark. The porch light flickered weakly, casting a dim glow on the front steps. I carefully pushed the door open, and the familiar creak of the hinges filled the silence. Inside, the house smelled stale, untouched since the last time Ella had been here. The echoes of her presence lingered in the corners of the rooms, the kitchen where we shared countless meals, the couch where we used to relax after long days. It was all still there, frozen in time. But tonight, the house felt different. As I stepped inside, Amber, that's what I decided to call her for her amber-colored eyes, sniffed around cautiously. She hesitated at the threshold, unsure of what this new space would hold for her. I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. Was this another place where she would be abandoned? I set her down gently on the floor, watching as she slowly took in her new surroundings. She circled the living room cautiously, her ears alert, before she finally lay down in front of the fireplace. I knew I couldn't just let her roam around the house freely without offering her some comfort. I walked over to the old wooden dresser, pulling out a thick, worn blanket I used to wrap up in when the house got too cold. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. I returned to Amber, gently spreading the blanket on the floor beside her. She hesitated for a moment, but then stretched out on the soft fabric, curling up with a sigh. I watched her closely, wondering if she felt safe for the first time in a long while. As I stood up, I heard the unmistakable sound of tiny whimpers coming from the other side of the room. I turned to see the two puppies, both golden retriever pups, huddled together in the corner, their tiny bodies trembling with fear and cold. I hadn't even noticed them at first, too focused on Amber. But now as I looked at them, I realized that they were just as abandoned, just as lost as she was. I walked over to them, my heart breaking for these tiny souls who had been left behind in the same cruel way their mother had been. The little ones looked up at me with wide, scared eyes, their tiny bodies quivering in the cold. "They need you too," I whispered to myself. "I can't leave them out here." I carefully scooped the two puppies up, one in each arm, and made my way back to Amber. As I set them down on the blanket beside her, she immediately lifted her head. Her amber eyes locking onto the pups, she sniffed them gently, then licked their faces tenderly, as though instinctively knowing they needed her as much as they needed warmth. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of purpose rising within me. These animals, abandoned and alone, had no one else. But now they had me, and maybe, just maybe, I could heal too. Hey, I know you're probably wondering why this story means so much to me. To be honest, it's been a long time since I felt this connected to anything. If this story is speaking to you, I want you to know, you're not alone. We're all trying to find our way through the dark sometimes. So if you're feeling like this moment resonated with you, come join me. Let's keep telling these stories, sharing the ups and downs, and being there for one another. Hit that subscribe button, drop a comment about what's been weighing on your heart lately, and let's start a conversation. Because we're all in this together, and every story matters. The days that followed felt like a quiet revolution. Amber and her puppies, whom I had named Chase and Piper, settled into a routine, and surprisingly so did I. Every morning, I would wake up to the sound of their tiny paws scampering across the floor. followed by the warm, soft weight of Amber curling up beside me as I sat at the kitchen table drinking my coffee. It was as though the house, once so cold and lifeless, had been infused with a new sense of purpose. It wasn't the same as before, not by a long shot, but it was a start. The laughter I hadn't heard in months began to creep back into my life, especially as Chase and Piper grew more playful. The way they chased each other around the living room, tumbling over themselves in a chaotic mess of fur and laughter. It made me forget, even if just for a moment, the ache in my chest. But there were still moments where the sadness would return, like an unwelcome shadow. At night, when everything grew quiet and the house settled into stillness, my mind would often drift to Ella. I could almost hear her voice, her gentle laughter, her constant encouragement, and then the weight of grief would settle over me like a thick blanket, suffocating me. Amber, however, seemed to sense it. Every time I grew quiet, she would sidle up beside me, pressing her warm body against mine as if offering her silent companionship. She'd rest her head on my knee, and in those moments, it was as though she was telling me it was okay to grieve, but that I didn't have to do it alone. Then there were the puppies. Chase, despite being the weaker one when I first found them, grew into a spirited little guy, full of energy and curiosity. He would race around the yard, chasing after the tiniest things, leaves, bugs, shadows, and it never failed to bring a smile to my face. Piper, too, showed her own spark, her little squeaks filling the room as she followed her brother wherever he went. They were growing fast, too fast for my liking, but their energy was infectious. Even the usually stoic Amber seemed lighter, her tail wagging whenever they played, as though a part of her was healing alongside them. It wasn't just them. I was healing too, in ways I hadn't expected. I found myself getting out of bed a little earlier, tending to the house with a newfound purpose. I began to take them on walks to the park, something I hadn't done in months. I would watch as the puppies tumbled through the grass, racing each other under the wide open sky, while Amber walked by my side, her amber eyes watching over them like a guardian. I found joy in their simple, innocent play, a joy I had almost forgotten existed, and slowly the weight in my chest began to lift. The days didn't seem as long anymore, the world didn't seem so bleak, but not everything was perfect. Life, as it always does, had a way of throwing curveballs. It started one evening when the puppies woke me with their frantic barking. I rubbed my eyes and stumbled down the stairs, confused and bleary-eyed. Amber was already at the door, growling low and steady, her body stiff with tension. I crept toward the front door, trying not to wake the puppies, who were still groggily nestled in their bed. As I reached for the doorknob, the first sound hit me, a loud, sudden bang from outside, followed by a harsh voice shouting, "Hey, you better get those damn dogs under control." I froze, my hand still on the doorknob, my heart sinking. It was the neighbor, the same one who had already complained about the noise, the one who had threatened to call animal control if we didn't shut the dogs up. But this time there was no knock on the door, no warning, just anger, and more of that cruelty I had become all too familiar with. I opened the door just a crack, peeking out to see her standing on her porch, her arms crossed in frustration. She was glaring at me, her face twisted in disapproval. "You can't keep those dogs around here, causing all this ruckus. They're disturbing the peace," she shouted, her voice rising with each word. I was tired of fighting, tired of the constant tension with her. I didn't know what to say, but then I looked down at Amber, who was standing by my side, her amber eyes locked onto the neighbor, her body poised and defensive. I felt a surge of protectiveness rise up within me. These were my dogs, Amber, Chase, and Piper. They weren't just animals. They had become my family. They had brought me back from the edge, and I wasn't going to let anyone take them away. Not now, not ever. I took a deep breath and stepped outside, standing tall despite the knot in my stomach. "They're part of my family," I said quietly, my voice firm, though it shook with emotion. "And they have as much right to be here as anyone else." The neighbor scoffed, clearly unimpressed. "You'll regret this, you know. I'll make sure of it." But I stood my ground, feeling the weight of those 3 animals beside me, the love and loyalty they had shown me when I needed it most. I wasn't about to let that go. Then do what you have to do, I replied, my voice steady. But I'm not giving them up. The days following the confrontation with the neighbor were tense, but something had shifted within me. I wasn't the same man I had been when I first found Amber and her puppies. Back then, I had been broken, lost in my grief, struggling to find a way to go on. But now, with these 3 dogs by my side, I had found a reason to fight, a reason to stand up for something more than just surviving. Amber, Chase, and Piper had become my anchors. They kept me grounded when the weight of the world seemed too heavy to carry. They gave me something to look forward to every day, something to care for, and in turn, they cared for me in ways I never imagined possible. As the weeks passed, the tension with the neighbor slowly faded. Despite her threats, nothing came of them. The puppies continued to grow, and Amber, once so skittish and cautious, became more and more confident. She trusted me, trusted the home we had built together, and I learned to trust again too. One evening, as I sat on the couch with the puppies curled up at my feet and Amber resting her head on my lap, I realized that for the first time in a long while, I was at peace. The grief that had weighed me down for so long hadn't disappeared, but it had softened, fading into the background of my life as I moved forward. The road ahead wasn't easy. There would be more challenges, more hardships. But now, I didn't have to face them alone. I had Amber. I had Chase and Piper, and together we would face whatever came our way. As I looked down at the 3 of them, the warmth of their presence filling the room, I finally allowed myself to smile. It wasn't the carefree smile of the man I had been before Ella's death, but it was something. A small, quiet acknowledgement that I had made it through the darkness, that I wasn't lost anymore. And as the night stretched on, with the sound of gentle breathing filling the room, I realized that sometimes the most unexpected things can save you. A stray dog, abandoned and alone, had come into my life, and in doing so, had given me more than I could ever have imagined. She had given me hope, and with that I finally understood. Sometimes the most beautiful things in life come when you least expect them, and when you have the courage to take the first step toward healing.